The crystal glass shattered against the marble floor, and a gasp rippled through the crowded kitchen. Linda Evans collapsed beside the champagne table, her body twisting, foam gathering at the corners of her mouth. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Brooke's shrill scream tore through the air. "Someone call 911. Her mother was dying in the middle of my retirement party. I stood frozen, the stem of my own glass trembling between my fingers, and one thought echoed in my mind. That drink wasn't meant for her. 2 hours earlier, my Malibu home had been humming with laughter and expensive perfume. My son Daniel had insisted on hosting this celebration after I sold my consulting firm for $23 million. "Mom, you've earned this," he'd said, smiling with those gentle eyes that always knew how to charm me. His wife, Brooke, had offered to take care of everything. That, in itself, should have been my first red flag. Brooke, who once complained about washing a single dish, had transformed overnight into a domestic goddess. She arranged roses with surgical precision, polished silverware like her life depended on it, and directed the caterers as though she were running a presidential gala. While the guests mingled, I caught sight of her by the champagne table. She looked around, her movements sharp and deliberate. Then I saw it, a tiny glass vial slipping from her clutch. A few drops poured carefully into a single flute, the one with the faint chip along the rim. My glass. A chill crept up my spine, but I didn't flinch. In business, I'd learned that panic only feeds predators. Instead, I smiled, thanked my former partner for some dull comment about market trends, and watched Brooke approach with that saccharine smile. "Evelyn, you look a little tired," she cooed, handing me the flute. "You should toast to yourself. You deserve it." Her tone was smooth, her eyes too steady. I accepted the glass with a gracious smile. "You're too kind, dear." 10 minutes later, when she turned to show off her new diamond tennis bracelet to a neighbor, I quietly placed my flute beside Linda's purse. Poor Linda, always hovering at the edges of conversations, polite, distracted, eager not to be a burden. She reached for the nearest drink without looking. I turned just in time to see her sip. The effect was almost immediate. She blinked, coughed once, then clutched her chest as her knees buckled. The sound of the glass hitting the floor echoed like a gunshot. Guests screamed. Brooke dropped to her knees beside her mother, shaking her shoulders in what might have been genuine panic, or the best acting of her life. Daniel pushed through the crowd, white-faced. "What happened?" "She just collapsed," Brooke sobbed. 1 minute she was fine, then, oh God! Her eyes darted toward me for a split second, quick as a knife's glint. When the paramedics arrived, Brooke's hysteria was flawless. She clutched her pearls, cried about contaminated food, and wrung her hands with Oscar-worthy grief. Daniel hovered beside her, looking lost and terrified. But I saw it, the flicker of recognition when our eyes met. He knew something was wrong. He just didn't know I knew, too. At St. Mary's Hospital, the doctor's words confirmed my suspicions. "Acute poisoning," he said. "Plant-based alkaloids. We're running further tests." Brooke's lips trembled. "Poisoning? That can't be. My mother doesn't take anything unusual." "Strange," I murmured softly. "She did say the champagne had an interesting flavor. I wonder where you ordered it from." Brooke froze for a fraction of a second, the color draining from her face. "Champagne? You think that's what caused this?" "Oh, probably not," I said with a light laugh. "Just an old woman's imagination, always finding patterns where there aren't any." She tried to smile back, but her hand shook as she reached for her coffee. When the doctor returned, he said Linda would survive. Brooke wept with relief, perhaps too loudly. Daniel insisted I go home and rest. "Mom, you shouldn't drive. Let us handle everything. We'll stop by tomorrow, okay?" How thoughtful. "Keep the target still while you figure out what went wrong." I smiled sweetly. "I'll be fine, darling." Later that night, my Malibu house felt colder than usual. I poured myself a fresh glass of champagne, from a new bottle, naturally, and sat in my study. The ocean murmured outside, the waves steady and calm, unlike the storm behind my ribs. I opened my notebook and began to write, "Who benefits if I die?" The pen hovered over the page as I thought of Brooke's sudden devotion, Daniel's mounting debts, and the quiet envy that had crept into their smiles for years. No, this hadn't been a random accident. Someone had tried to kill me at my own celebration. And the next time they tried, they'd find out just how dangerous a 70-year-old woman can be when she's underestimated. By sunrise, Malibu was quiet except for the rhythmic hiss of waves against the cliffs. I hadn't slept. The unopened champagne bottle still sat on the counter like a silent witness, the fractured reflection of last night's chaos shimmering in its glass. I brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead and spread out my checkbooks, old tax folders, and credit notes across the kitchen table. Years of motherly generosity stared back at me in black ink. $15,000 for Daniel's firm when a client forgot to pay. $40,000 for Brooks Boutique rebranding. Another $25,000 for their mortgage deposit. Private school tuition for Emma. Jewelry purchases, trips, cars. Nearly $200,000 over 5 years. It hadn't been love. It had been advance payment on my funeral. By mid-morning, my son arrived with a pastry box and that gentle, guilt-wrapped smile. "Morning, Mom. I brought your favorite, cranberry scones." He'd even used my favorite bakery. The details stung. "Daniel," I said, "you should be at the hospital checking on Brooke's mother." "I was," he said quickly. "She's stable, thank God." He hesitated, then shifted to what he'd really come for. "Mom, about yesterday, it made me realize something. You shouldn't be alone in this big house." Ah, here it came. He launched into his pitch with the precision of an architect presenting a doomed blueprint. "There's this amazing place, Sunset Manor. It's not a nursing home, more like a community for active seniors. Golf course, spa, classes, medical staff on site. You'd love it." "How lovely," I said dryly. "What does paradise cost these days?" "Just a one-time entrance fee," he said. $400,000, but it covers everything for life. $400,000. Exactly the amount that would loosen my estate before I could change my will." "That's generous," I murmured, watching him squirm. He took it as interest. "You'd be safe there, Mom. Brooke and I could visit all the time." I smiled. "I'll think about it." The moment he left, I called someone who never pretended to love me for my money, my attorney, Thomas Reed. Thomas had handled my business contracts for 2 decades. When I told him what happened, he didn't gasp or question my sanity. He simply said, "Then we build walls, not fences." That afternoon, in his mahogany-scented office, we mapped a fortress of legal armor. He drafted an irrevocable trust that locked my wealth behind iron doors. He added clauses that would trigger automatic audits if anyone touched my accounts without authorization. He drew up a medical directive naming exactly who could and couldn't make health decisions for me. "And if they try to declare you incompetent," he asked, pen poised, "then the trust goes straight to charity," I said. "Let them explain that to their mortgage lender." Thomas nodded, impressed. "You've still got a shark's instincts, Evelyn." "I've been bitten enough to learn," I replied. By evening, I hired a security company to install motion sensors, cameras, and a panic button system. The neighbors were told I'd had package thefts. In reality, I was preparing for predators of another kind. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor, Linda Evans herself. Pale, shaky, but very much alive. She clutched a small purse like a lifeline. "I had to see you," she said. "Brooke told me I must have taken the wrong medication. But I don't take any medication, Evelyn." I gestured for her to sit. "Tell me what you remember." She frowned, concentrating. "I remember feeling dizzy, but before that I saw Brooke near the drinks table. She had this tiny bottle, like an eyedropper. She poured something into a glass. I thought it was flavoring or perfume. Her voice cracked. My own daughter, Evelyn. What kind of monster? The words hung between us. She meant to kill me, I said softly, but I switched the glasses. Linda's face drained of color. Then You lived, I said gently. And now, maybe, we can stop her. Later that day, I made another call, this time to an old friend from the corporate trenches, Patricia Hale, private investigator. She didn't ask why I needed her. She only said, "Give me 48 hours." When Patricia's report arrived, I felt the room tilt. Daniel and Brooke were drowning. Their house had been refinanced 3 times. Credit card debt exceeded $80,000. Daniel's firm was bleeding money. And Brooke had taken out a $500,000 life insurance policy on me, listing herself as the beneficiary. There was one more name in the file that froze my blood. Dr. Richard Coleman, a geriatric psychiatrist Daniel had been paying for consultations. Consultations for what? I asked Patricia. She hesitated. He's known for declaring elderly clients incompetent, if the family's willing to pay. I closed the folder and stared out at the darkening sea. They weren't just planning to kill me. They had a plan B, to steal my sanity, my freedom, and everything I'd built. The difference was, now I knew the rules of their game, and I was about to rewrite them. Lunch at Seaside Grill felt like a memory replaying in a warped mirror. Daniel had chosen the same place where we'd once celebrated his college graduation, back when he believed success was something you earned, not inherited. He was nervous, stirring his iced tea until the cubes melted. "Mom, I'm so glad you agreed to meet," he said. "I just want you to be safe. That's all Brooke and I care about." I smiled, the kind of smile that had closed million-dollar deals and disarmed rivals twice his age. "You've always been such a thoughtful son," he brightened. "So, you've been thinking about Sunset Manor?" "I have," I said, watching his shoulders relax. "You were right. Maybe it's time for a new chapter." He exhaled, visibly relieved. "Mom, I knew you'd see it that way. They even have an opening next week. If we handle the paperwork quickly, you can secure it before someone else does." "How quickly?" I asked, pretending to hesitate. "By Friday," he said eagerly. "I can help with everything. The financial forms, the power of attorney, just to make it easier." There it was, the phrase I'd been waiting for, power of attorney. I leaned forward, letting my voice tremble just slightly. "You'd really do that for me?" "Of course," he said, reaching across the table. His palm was warm, but his eyes betrayed calculation. "Whatever you need." "Perfect." The next day, they came to my house with folders thick enough to crush a conscience. Brooke was dressed like an attorney, black blazer, sleek bun, a laptop in hand. Daniel looked tired but determined, the face of a man convincing himself this was mercy, not theft. "This is the admission packet," Brooke explained, her tone brisk, professional. "These are the financial disclosures Sunset Manor requires. Just routine, of course. And this," she slid another document toward me, "is the power of attorney. It's standard, really." I picked up the papers, scanning the lines that shimmered with deception. It gave Daniel immediate access to every asset I owned, under the pretense of emergency management. Once I signed, my entire fortune would be his. "This seems extensive," I murmured. "It's just precautionary," Daniel said quickly. "If anything happened, like what we saw with Brooke's mom, you'd want someone you trust making decisions." The irony nearly made me laugh. I looked up, letting my eyes glisten just enough. "You're right, dear. It's probably wise." Brooke's relief was palpable. "Wonderful. We'll just need your signature here, and we'll file it first thing tomorrow." I signed, slowly, carefully, on the dotted line of a document that wasn't what they thought it was. What they didn't know was that Thomas Reed had drafted a second set of papers, a decoy power of attorney tied to a dummy account containing exactly $1. The real assets were buried deep in an irrevocable trust they couldn't touch. I folded the papers neatly and handed them back. I do feel better having this done, I said. But before anything's finalized, my attorney needs to review the tax implications. He'll be stopping by this morning. Brooke froze. Your attorney? You didn't mention. The doorbell rang. But it wasn't Thomas who entered. It was Detective Lisa Monroe and her partner. Her badge glinted under the California light. Mrs. Carter, we need to ask a few questions about the incident at your party. Daniel stiffened. What incident? The poisoning, the detective said evenly. The hospital confirmed your mother-in-law ingested a high concentration of oleander extract, a lethal toxin. We also tested the champagne bottle from the party. Brooke's face drained of color. That's impossible. I don't even know what that is. Detective Monroe didn't flinch. The same toxin was found in the glass believed to be intended for Mrs. Carter. For a moment, silence thickened the air. I set my teacup down carefully. Detective, perhaps you should also show them the insurance document you found. The detective nodded, producing a file. A $500,000 life insurance policy on Mrs. Carter, taken out by Mrs. Brooke Evans 6 months ago. Brooke's lips trembled. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, I said, my voice steady now. I saw you pour something into my glass, Brooke. I switched it with your mother's. You nearly killed her. Daniel turned to his wife, horrified. Brooke, you told me this was just about convincing her. Convincing me to sign my life away? I interrupted. I know about Dr. Coleman. I know you paid him to declare me incompetent if I refused. Daniel sank into the couch, his hands trembling. The detective's voice cut through the air. Mrs. Evans, you're under arrest for attempted murder. As she was handcuffed, Brooke looked at me with eyes full of venom. You think you've won? You have no idea what you've done. Oh, I do, I said softly. I just did it better. When the door closed behind them, Daniel sat motionless, staring at the papers scattered across my table. Their grand plan reduced to meaningless ink. I leaned forward, resting a hand on his shoulder. Those power of attorney papers you're holding, I said, they give you control over one account. It has $1 in it. He looked up, disbelief clouding his face. The rest, I said quietly, belongs to someone who still deserves it. Outside, the ocean breeze carried the faint sound of sirens fading toward the highway. The storm had passed, but the reckoning had only begun. 3 months later, the headlines had faded, but the echo of betrayal lingered like the faint taste of bitter champagne. Brooke Evans was sentenced to 15 years in prison for attempted murder. The courtroom had been packed that day. Reporters, curious neighbors, even a few of Daniel's former clients who came to witness the family downfall they'd once envied. Brooke didn't cry when the verdict was read. She just stared at me across the aisle, her gaze cold, unrepentant, as if I were the villain for surviving her plan. Daniel's trial was quieter, but harder to watch. He pled guilty to conspiracy and financial fraud. 3 years. The judge called him a man blinded by debt and influence. But I knew better. He hadn't been blinded. He'd simply chosen the easy path, the one paved with my money. Their house in Westlake Village was seized to cover unpaid loans and credit cards. The boutique closed, the architectural firm dissolved, and the luxury cars disappeared one tow truck at a time. Justice had been served, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like burial. My attorney, Thomas Reed, arrived the week after the sentencing with a folder thick with final documents. Everything's in place, he said. The trust is now fully active. No one can touch your estate without your written approval. And if anyone ever tries to have you declared incompetent, the assets immediately transfer to charity. I exhaled slowly, feeling the kind of relief that comes not from winning, but from surviving. Good, I said. Let the vultures find nothing but bones. Thomas smiled faintly. You always were the sharpest strategist in the room. I wasn't so sure anymore. Age brings wisdom, yes, but it also brings an ache. The kind that sits deep in your ribs when you realize you've outlived the best version of people you once loved. A week later, my granddaughter Emma called from Chicago. "Grandma, I got into Northwestern, pre-law, just like you suggested." Her voice was bright, full of hope untouched by greed. I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Your grandfather would have been so proud." "Can I visit you this summer?" she asked. "I miss Malibu." "I'd love that," I said softly. "There's always a room for you here." After we hung up, I sat in my garden overlooking the Pacific. The roses were blooming again, lush, defiant, thriving, despite everything that had withered around them. Linda Evans visited often now. We'd become unlikely friends, bonded by the absurd tragedy of surviving our own family's betrayal. She stirred sugar into her tea and said, "You ever regret pressing charges? I mean, Daniel is your son." I thought about that for a moment. The wind carried the scent of salt and earth, and I remembered the boy Daniel once was, the one who used to bring me seashells from the beach, proud as if he'd found treasure. "I don't regret it," I said finally, "but I do mourn what it cost. Love doesn't excuse cruelty, Linda. It just makes the wounds deeper." She nodded, eyes shining. "Maybe that's why it had to be you. To remind people that boundaries aren't cruelty. They're survival." That night I found myself staring at the single photograph still standing on my mantel. Daniel at 8 years old, grinning with a missing tooth, his arm around a dog we rescued together. I picked it up, brushed the dust from the frame, and whispered, "I hope someday you remember who you were before the money mattered." A few weeks later, I received a letter from the Department of Corrections. Daniel wanted to see me. Against my better judgment, I went. In the visitation room, he looked smaller somehow, deflated. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. I thought I could fix everything. I thought if I just—" "Stole from me," I interrupted gently. "Controlled me? Pretended it was love?" He swallowed hard. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know." Brooke made it sound like the only way. I was desperate. I studied his face. The lies were gone, replaced by something raw and exhausted. "Desperation isn't an excuse," I said, "but it can be a beginning, if you learn from it." He nodded, tears pooling in his eyes. "I don't deserve another chance." "Maybe not," I said softly, "but you have one anyway. Don't waste it." When I walked out of that room, the air felt lighter. I wasn't angry anymore, just finished. Back home, the sun was setting over the ocean, gilding the waves with gold. I poured a glass of Pinot Noir and stood by the window as the light faded. My house, once a battlefield, now felt peaceful, guarded by law, memory, and hard-won wisdom. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Love you, Grandma. You're my hero." I smiled, whispering to the quiet room, "I'm no hero, sweetheart. I just refuse to disappear." The roses swayed in the wind outside, glowing red against the dusk, proof that even after poison, beauty can return. Some victories aren't loud. They're quiet, steady, and alive. And sometimes, the truest form of justice is simply this: to keep living well, and never let those who tried to destroy you enjoy the ruins they left behind.